Stop eating at night, you'll get fat. Go and do your homework. You'll start thinking, play sports, you'll look great. But what if I told you that all the logical chains I've just spoken don't seem to work? You know, it seems like none of it matters at all. Do absolutely anything you want, because as strange as it may sound, your future is completely predetermined.
I hope you find the courage to make your life a blessing. Don't
let anything hold you back. Stay hungry. Stay reckless. The limit is your imagination, so go and make magic. We can tell you with almost 70% accuracy what you'll look like in 10 years. Where you'll work, what your hobbies will be, what food you'll like, what car you'll drive, and what your favorite color will be. And I'm not talking about fate, I'm talking about genetics.
Okay.
1980. First day of school at Saliva Community College. Robert Shafran is driving to school in his old, colorful Volvo. The car, by the way, has a nickname, Old. Today is Robert's first day at a new college. He's nervous and anxious, but he has no idea how much his life will change today. As soon as he gets out of the car, strange things start to happen. Students approach him and greet him in an overly friendly manner. They ask how he spent his summer and pat him on the shoulder. It seems cool, a new college, good that way. But then things get much stranger. An unfamiliar student approaches Robert and kisses him right on the lips. Robert gets lost. Completely confused, Robert walks through college looking for his dorm. Then suddenly he hears a shout from behind him. "Hi, Eddie." "Am I not Eddie?" "Yeah, very funny, Eddie." Quote, Robert Shafran finally finds his room, goes in, and starts unpacking. Then suddenly another student runs into the room. It's Michael Domnitz, a close friend of that very Eddie, and he seems to understand what's going on. Behind the closed door of the room, an awkward and very strange conversation takes place. 10 minutes later, Robert Shafran and Michael Domnitz run out of the room and, without looking back, quickly run out of the dorm. They run halfway across the college campus, run into a phone booth, and frantically start calling this very Eddie. Eddie answers, and is immediately asked point blank, "Edie, are you adopted?" "Yes." "When is your birthday?" "July 12th. "Which adoption agency?" "We Services." The puzzle in Robert's head begins to come together. Robert and Mike get into an old Sukhoi. Cool name. And they race at full speed to this very Eddie. They arrive at their destination at midnight. They approach the house and, before they can knock, the door opens. And Robert sees himself in the doorway. Standing at the front door of the house is an exact copy of Robert. Ed and Robert are absolutely identical. And what is DNA? DNA is a double helix. It's a molecule that encodes the genetic information of all living things. DNA is present in all life forms. It is DNA that dictates how an organism develops. All people share 99.9% of their DNA, meaning you and I differ by only 0.1%. DNA is a kind of instruction manual for our bodies. But how closely do we follow these instructions? Height, skin color, eye color, hair color, and other distinguishing features. This is all clear. Some studies show that, for example, sleep patterns are genetically inherited. an international team of researchers analyzed the genomes of 700,000 people. Michael Whedon, the author of the study, said, "We don't actually have a preference for a particular pattern, but nature takes its course, and we end up in one category or another." A study published in Scientific Reports showed that we also choose our educational subjects for a reason. The authors looked at the subjects' 6,584 pairs of siblings enrolled in. It turned out that the decision to choose a particular course is 80% genetic. Statistically, it's even hereditary. Some might say, yes, that's understandable, because the children didn't have a strong family role model. But no. A study of 20,000 adopted people analyzed their marriages and those of their biological parents. It found that children raised in intact adoptive families, where the parents were together, were still more likely to divorce if their biological parents divorced. And they divorced simply because of personality traits, such as their quick temper and excessive emotionality. Scientists also found a gene region responsible for altruism, that is, kindness and mutual support. This gene influences, among other things, family life. Women who are married to a husband with an abnormal gene variant are usually unhappy with their family relationships. So it turns out that we can genetically predetermine what kind of marriage you will have. So, can we really say that divorce is our choice, and not something predetermined by nature? Eddie and Robert are absolutely identical. Just a few days later, an article about Eddie and Robert appears in the New York Post. An amazing story. An adopted child finds his twin brother after 19 years, although he didn't even know he had a twin. How did this happen? There will be even more questions. While Eddie and Robert are getting to know each other and getting used to their new status as twin brothers, Eddie's house rings. His mother picks up. "Hello, is Eddie home?" "No, and who is this?" "My name is David Kelman. I was born on July 12, 1961, and now I am holding a newspaper in my hands, in which there are 2 pictures of me. I think I am the third." So, they met. Eddie, Robert, and David. 3 identical twins. Completely identical. They found each other after 19 years, and they found each other completely by chance. They didn't just look alike, they moved alike, had the same habits. They listened to the same music, they smoked the same cigarettes. They had the same taste in women. And then the coincidence gets even stranger. They all grew up in families with adopted sisters of the same age. They're just 3 clones. 3 absolutely identical clones. And yet, they all grew up in different families. 3 families with different income levels. Robert, the son of a doctor and a lawyer, lived in a very prestigious neighborhood. Ed, the son of a teacher, lived in a middle-class neighborhood, a strict life. David, the son of immigrants, the son of a working man. And yet, his father was an incredibly kind and very loving person. All 3 immediately become famous. They are invited to TV shows, they are published in magazines. They become real stars. They hold microphones the same way and answer questions the same way. The brothers took full advantage of the celebrity lifestyle. They were constantly partying and having fun, rented a bachelor apartment together, lived there, and even once appeared in a cameo in a movie with Madonna. Later, all 3 brothers married, started families, and opened their own restaurant in New York called Triplets. The restaurant was doing great, a complete success. But their parents weren't in the mood for fun at the time. How did this even happen? All the children knew they were adopted, but they didn't know they had twin brothers. And most importantly, their parents didn't know either. No one told them anything at the time of adoption. Then the parents went to the adoption center where it all began, Wise Services. This agency had been operating since 1915, founded by the American political elite, and was the leading agency on the entire East Coast, particularly for Jewish children. The parents met with management. The agency admitted that they felt it was unnecessary to mention the triplets. Why was that? The chances of adopting triplets at once are extremely slim, and the parents would hardly be able to separate the children. So the agency decided the children should be separated and adopted individually. The parents decided to sue, contacted several law firms, and one after another, each lawyer started turning them down. They behaved strangely. No one would take the case, as if someone was forbidding them. From this point on, the story becomes not just incredible, but cinematic. This is Lawrence Reed, a journalist. He was writing an article for New York Magazine about stories of twin separations. Not these specific ones, but in general. And while writing, he came across a very strange study, a psychoanalytic analysis of a child. It talked about secret studies in which identical twins, that is, completely genetically identical, were deliberately separated, and all the reported cases occurred in the same place. New York. Lewis Wise Services. From this point on, the beautiful story of the triplets' reunification turns into a crime detective story. This whole story is the result of a government experiment. They weren't separated to make them easier to adopt. They were separated to study their lives. All three families began to recall strange events from the triplets' childhoods. People came to the families. According to the adoption agency workers, they were supposedly supposed to monitor the future of the children who had passed through their agency. The parents were perfectly fine with this. Why not? These people tested the children. IQ tests, Rorschach ink blots, children's puzzles, and they also constantly filmed the children. After conducting the tests, these people went to the families of other twins and did the same. They conducted the tests without telling anyone that there were twins. The experiment was led by Dr. Peter Neubauer, an Austrian refugee who fled the Holocaust and moved to the United States. A highly respected doctor. And the triplets, as it later turned out, weren't the only ones. When Lawrence Reed published his article, other twins came forward with similar stories. That was the experiment. What's more important, nature or nurture, genetics or society? Researchers took abandoned twins and deliberately placed them in different families with varying income levels. Robert, the son of a doctor and a lawyer, lived in a very prestigious neighborhood. David, the son of a teacher, lived in a middle-class neighborhood, but lived an austere life. His father raised his son in Spartan conditions. David, the son of immigrants, was a working-class child from the poorest family of the group. But his father was incredibly kind and loved his child dearly. So, genetically, they are absolutely identical, but their upbringings were completely different. So what will they see when the twins grow up? A person as a whole, their appearance, their character are influenced by two factors: genetics, heredity, and the environment. And there is a belief that the influence of genes diminishes over time. The longer we live, the more people we meet, the more books we read, the more films we see, and the influence of the environment increases. But research shows the opposite is true. In 2014, Yale University physician and sociologist Nicholas Christakis and University of California professor James Fowler demonstrated that genes can predict who we will befriend. The researchers selected 1,932 people, most of whom were already friends. An analysis of nearly 500,000 genetic markers showed that friends shared more similar gene variants than strangers. We choose our friends unconsciously. We do so as our genes tell us. Your friends aren't just similar to you in appearance, they are similar to you genetically. So, the idea that external influences increase over time is flawed, because those same genes tell us who to befriend, who to start a family with, and even what movies to watch. And once again, the question arises, so are we really free to make our own choices? Yes, experiments are moral, literally, experiments on children. But in the late 1950s, few cared. Society was very different. And the experiment is far more immoral than it seems at first glance. As I already said, the goal of the study was to place 3 twins in 3 different families with different parents. But how can we know how the parents will really treat the child? It's very simple. Check in advance. They literally manipulated entire families. Lewis Weiss Services tested what parents would be like on older sisters, and then added younger twins to the family. This is absolutely astounding and also completely immoral. So, what were the results? 3 twins, raised in completely different families, were completely identical. They behaved identically. They literally finished each other's sentences. They smoked the same cigarettes, wrestled in school. It was their choice. They liked the same food. They had the same favorite color. And here we are faced with a very frightening reality. We all have it ingrained in our heads that we can choose our own path. We are free in this choice. You can always go to school to be a doctor or become an actor. You can study hard, or you can drop out of school. You can look for that special someone and create a strong family, or you cannot think about it at all. It is entirely your choice. You are free in this choice. But the results of the experiment show that it is not. Everything is predetermined, like 3 twins, raised in 3 completely different families with different parents at different schools, choosing the same sports team. How? Each of the 3 brothers lived in completely different environments, but in many ways chose the same path. So the question is, are we really free? You know, now, out of spite, you want to do something stupid, like start smoking, to say, this is my choice. And then you think, maybe this element of rebellion was also predetermined? All the information we received from this study was found by a journalist. What the study's real goals were, we still don't know. It was not published, and the results are classified. What happened to the brothers next? They started fighting. Running a business together didn't lead to anything good. They met in adulthood. And then the fact that they didn't really know each other came into play. Robert left the business, and Eddie fell into a deep depression. He began to experience mood swings and was diagnosed with manic psychosis. And soon, Eddie passed away. He himself did what YouTube forbids us to name. In fact, this is where the difference in upbringing came into play. Ed's father is a very strict and tough man. He literally raised his child with military rigor. He is a teacher and is used to managing children. Eddie always felt like an outsider, like he belonged in the family. He was deeply unhappy. Many of the children in this study had difficult childhoods. All 3 were seen by a psychiatrist in their teens. The other twins found also had depression. Perhaps we can't say for sure. This is also a result of the separation of children. Before his death, Eddie was literally obsessed with finding his biological mother. And they found her. In the archives of the New York Public Library, they found a birth record of triplets and, from this data, discovered their mother. They met her, and she told the story of how she became pregnant while still a student. She decided to give up the children when she learned she was having triplets. The mother also had mental health issues, and so did the triplets. It turns out that mental health is hereditary. So, it doesn't matter what kind of family you grew up in, it doesn't matter how loving the family is, and it doesn't matter how well your parents approached raising you. If your parents had mental health issues, it turns out you will too. Sounds scary. In 1990, Peter Neubauer donated his records to the Yale Child Study Center on the condition that they wouldn't be published until 2065. Another 40 years. The data from this experiment will be classified. The Louisville service has already been shut down. Peter Neubauer is already dead. And we can only guess what's in those records. The most terrible thing is when genes don't work as they should. And now a little about the rarest, scariest, and most astonishing genetic diseases. Fibrodysplasia is a rare genetic disorder in which new bones are constantly forming in the body. These new bones appear in the place of muscles, ligaments, and tendons. Epidermolysis SPP is a condition in which a person's skin becomes incredibly fragile. The skin literally tears and slides off. Horrible. Proteus syndrome causes uncontrolled cell growth, uncontrolled tissue growth, which greatly disfigures a person. I will post photos of people with this disease on my Telegram channel. Subscribe, it's in the description. Hutchinson-Gilford syndrome. This disease affects 1 in 7 million people. This disease is also called infantile senility. With this syndrome, children age extremely quickly and already feel like very old people in their teens. Raynaud syndrome. A disease in which a person gains weight rapidly. Verrucous epidermodysplasia. This disease turns the skin into bark. It's also called tree-like syndrome. The patient becomes covered in warts. They form on every inch of the body, especially on the hands and feet. And these hardened warts look very much like tree bark. Analgesia. Congenital insensitivity to pain. The person simply doesn't feel pain, which means they can, for example, grab a hot frying pan and not realize their hand is covered in burns. Fatal familial insomnia. A very rare disease in which a person simply cannot sleep and dies as a result. Sleeping pills don't help. I wonder if anyone who has a twin brother or sister watches this video? If so, if that's you, let me know in the comments. Now, of course, I think, wow, cool, really, really cool. But people used to think completely differently. In ancient Rus, the birth of twins was considered bad luck, and the mother was accused of infidelity. It was believed that one child was born from one man, and the other from another. Incidentally, twins were also considered twins, even if they were very similar or born on the same day. In some regions, twins were strictly forbidden from attending ceremonies dedicated to other siblings. That is, a twin couldn't attend his brother's wedding. The Kakafa Indian tribe held a celebration when twins were born. It was believed that happy times had arrived for the entire people. And the birth of twins was a divine omen. In Indonesia, the birth of twins was believed to be the soul being torn in two. They considered this extremely bad, and one of the twins was killed to free a piece of the soul. In Thailand, it was believed that twins of different sexes had been husband and wife in a past life. This, by the way, relates to my video about belief in reincarnation. Watch it. Among the ancient inhabitants of Japan, the birth of twins was considered a contagious disease, and a family with such children was expelled from the village. In Uganda, it was believed that if multiple children were born, they could be considered animals. They were raised to be true warriors, who, it seemed, feared nothing. Some tribes living in South Africa to this day consider twins superior beings. Children are entitled to various privileges for life, and when a chief dies, the youngest twin becomes the ruler of the tribe. In short, it's complete obscurantism. And the next story is truly brutal. The twins' entire lives were completely destroyed by doctors. August 22, 1965, Canada. Janie Trimer became the mother of twins Bruce and Brian. The boys were born healthy and developed within normal limits until 7 months. Then, the brothers were diagnosed with phimose, a genital defect. The Reimers were advised to solve the problem with surgery. The procedure is standard, frequently performed, and not very complicated. No one thought anything could go wrong. It was this operation that ultimately ruined the life of one of the boys. During the operation, the doctor used a special electric instrument instead of a regular scalpel. the instrument worked poorly and ultimately caused irreparable damage to the boy's genitals. This simple medical error left Bruce permanently crippled. Even more unfortunate is that Brian, Bruce's twin brother, was never operated on. After some time, his phimos resolved on its own without treatment. The Reimers didn't know what to do. The parents felt that Bruce was now doomed to be an unhappy and crippled man for the rest of his life. A true family tragedy. But at some point, Janet saw a discussion about sex reassignment surgeries on television. The renowned sexologist John Money participated in the discussion. At the time, he was considered a leading researcher on gender issues. Incidentally, he also coined the term gender. A glimmer of hope flickered. Janet decided to seek help from Dr. Money. In 1965, John Money, a professor of medicine, founded a gender identity clinic. He focused on issues of sexual behavior, orientation, and gender. Money believed that gender identity is a social construct formed in the human psyche through upbringing. He hypothesized that children actually remain gender neutral until age 2, and the period from 0 to 2 he called the gender gate. During this time, he hypothesized, parents could influence their child's gender identity, even if their biological sex was perfectly normal. The doctor wanted to conduct experiments to confirm his theory. And finally, a lucky break presented itself. Janet wrote Money a letter. Here's everything you need to conduct the experiment. Identical twins, meaning genetically identical, and the possibility of raising one child as a boy and the other as a girl. This was precisely the plan. When Money examined the crippled infant, he came to a disappointing conclusion. The only way to raise Bruce as a man capable of gerosexual relations was to raise him as a woman. Let's say it again. One twin will be raised as a boy, and the other as a girl, despite the fact that they are completely genetically identical. Then Bruce Reimer became Brenda Reimer. And in 1967, shortly before his second birthday, he underwent sex reassignment surgery. John Money warned the parents that they were under no circumstances to tell Brandy or her twin brother, Brian, about the surgeries. The Reimers were also required to regularly visit a doctor so that he could write prescriptions for hormone therapy, which Brandy was prescribed. This was necessary to make her body resemble that of a woman. Thus began one of the most terrifying experiments on twins. The children were frequently taken to the doctor, where he conducted rather dubious tests, often photographing the children. Money and his students did everything possible to make Bruce, that is, Brenda, completely believe in her femininity. The doctor recorded all the data in a file named John 1. This is a description of the experiment without naming names. Money began publishing excerpts from this study when Brenda was 5 years old. In 1972, Money published a book titled Man and Woman, Boy and Girl. 3 years later, in 1975, Money published a study titled Sexual Labels. What does it mean to be a man or a woman? There, he described the forced transition from Bruce to Brenda and described it as a model of obvious success. Money, citing the twins' mother, noted that Brenda was much neater than Brian, loved dresses, and loved jewelry. He also noticed that Brenda was growing up more stubborn and strong. Money wrote that she was a tomboy. But still, a girl. Money's study instantly became popular. It was widely written about and discussed. Radical feminists took notice. The hypothesis that gender is not innate was finally confirmed. Money's gender theory implied that there was no biological reason why men were better at math or science than women. He believed that nurture, not nature, determined whether a person felt male or female. Time magazine even wrote about the scientist's success. John 1's experiment was included in textbooks on pediatrics, sexology, and psychotherapy, as proof that anatomical features do not determine destiny. They are merely an excuse to raise a child in a specific, predetermined way. Money's work stimulated the development of sex reassignment research. And then, in 1980, John Money suddenly stopped commenting on his research. Why? Because, in reality, there was no success. Brenda Reimer didn't know she was born a boy, but she grew up a real tomboy. She loved to fight, climb trees, and refused to play with dolls. She had no friends, and her brother, Brian, was embarrassed by his sister. He didn't invite her to join his group. At school, the girl was terribly teased for her appearance, her mannerisms, her behavior, and even the way she walked. She often said she felt like a boy, although she didn't know who she really was. The family remained silent and said nothing to the child. Janie Tramer's mother recalled, "I noticed that Brando didn't feel happy as a girl. She often rebelled, was very masculine. I couldn't even persuade her to play with dolls. At school, they called her Cave Woman." Over time, Dr. Money's crazy experiment began to destroy the entire Reimer family. The twins' father, Ron, became an alcoholic. Brian, as a teenager, began abusing illegal substances, engaging in petty theft and hooliganism. Brenda became increasingly insecure and withdrawn. And finally, their father decided he could no longer tolerate hiding the truth from his children. 1980, the twins turned 15. Their father took the children to a cafe for ice cream. And there he confessed everything. Brenda's life was turned upside down again, but now everything seemed to fall into place. Suddenly, everything made sense, and I understood who and what I was. From that moment on, Brenda disappeared, and David appeared. The twin asked to be called that. He asked his loved ones to talk to him as a boy. He began taking hormones again, this time in reverse, to restore the levels of male hormones in his body. David not only took hormones but also underwent a second gender reassignment surgery. Regular testosterone injections gave him masculine features. Now David had finally found himself. He married his girlfriend, and the couple adopted 3 children. He began living the normal life of a model family man, going fishing, and dabbling in antiques and numismatics. At 30, David agreed to work with another sexologist, Milton Damond. The doctor wanted to prevent other doctors from prescribing such traumatic treatment to children. He completely refuted John Money's theory and wanted to prove that gender can't be imposed on a person. The doctor wrote a paper with the actual results of the experiment. David's true story caused a great stir. Dr. Money, who claimed the experiment was successful, was simply lying. In 2000, a book dedicated to David's full story was published, and a few months later, he appeared on The Oprah Winfrey Show. In interviews, David often said, "Mom and Dad wanted the operation to work, and I was happy." This is every parent's dream, but you can't be someone you're not. It seemed that David had managed to cope with the consequences of his participation in John Money's experiment. But it was only that. His brother Brian was treated for schizophrenia for a long time, and in 2002, he died of an overdose. David took the loss of his twin very hard. He lost his job and spent almost all his time at home. He lived solely on the money he earned from his book copyrights. He often complained to his wife about his inadequacy and said he simply didn't know what to do next. On the morning of May 5, 2004, David Reimer voluntarily passed away. He was 38 years old. John Money's horrific experiment completely destroyed the Reimer family. The idea that nurture is stronger than genes proved unfounded. Nature could not be defeated. In 2005, in Hall County, Georgia, Stephen Mobley tried to avoid execution by claiming that the murder of a pizza vendor he committed was the result of a mutation in his genes. The judge rejected the appeal. However, the idea that a specific gene called MAO may be the primary cause of violence has gained widespread acceptance. This gene is now called the warrior gene. So are criminals responsible for their crimes? If their character and temperament are hereditary, they did not choose them. Someone might say, often, it's the environment that influences a person, whether they're from a dysfunctional family, a poor neighborhood, or a bad school. But that's not a choice they make either. In that case, crime isn't a choice. (1939) USA. Twin boys are born in a hospital in Piqua, Ohio. Their mother, realizing she couldn't feed them, decided to give them up for adoption. 3 weeks later, the newborns were separated. One of the twins was given to Ernest and Sari Springer. 2 weeks later, the brother was adopted by Jesse and Lucille Lewis from Lima, a town located nearby. And that's when the strangest coincidences began. Both boys were named Jim. They had the same names. The adoptive parents had never met the twins' mother and were initially convinced that one of the brothers had died at birth. But when the brothers were 1.5 years old, the truth came to light. While Lucille Lewis was filling out the adoption paperwork, she overheard a conversation between government employees. They were whispering that the second brother was also named Jim. All these years, I knew he was alive and often wondered if he had a roof over his head and if he was okay. Jim Lewis learned he had a twin brother as a child, but he only decided to find him at age 39. I don't know why then. It turned out the timing was simply right. He went to the court that handled adoption matters for information about his twin. A month after Lewis' request, he received a call at home. 5 days later, the twins met, but they had no idea how much alike they were. I remember driving from Lima to Dayton, where Jean was waiting for me. It was our first meeting. I was incredibly nervous. My palms were sweating uncomfortably. But when we met, I calmed down. I didn't feel like I was a stranger. The brothers met, and let's just list the similarities. They preferred the same brand of cigarettes. They drank the same beer. They both drove Chevrolets. And both cars were blue. The twins went to the same beach in Florida on vacation. Both suffered from migraines. Both had a habit of biting their nails. Both had the same romantic games with their wives. They both liked to hide notes for them around the house. And later it turned out that their brothers, that is, their parents' biological children, had the same names. In school, both brothers really liked math and both hated spelling. Both brothers' wives had the same name, Linda. A few years later, both brothers divorced and both remarried. And their new wives also had the same names. In general, all this sounds somehow dubious. Again, I suspect that this is some kind of TV show. But if this is really true, then wow. Soon, the twins had sons, who were given names that differed by only one letter: James Alone and James Allen. At one point, both twins worked as deputy sheriffs. Each of us felt like we were letting something important into our lives. This feeling only disappeared when we met. The story of the twins immediately spread around the world and attracted the interest of scientists. Psychologist Thomas Bouchard Jr. from the University of Minnesota decided that Lewis and Springer were ideally suited to study the influence of heredity on personality, interests, and intellectual development. We are convinced that these identical twins, who grew up amazingly, will make history and become the subject of scientific research. They began testing the twins. We tried out at the university for a week, and during that time we took tests one after another. Among other things, the scientists took blood samples, took x-rays, and gave us personality tests. My brother and I hardly saw each other there, except occasionally crossing paths in the hallway. When the twins were asked to draw the first thing that came to their minds, they both drew the same thing. It was a little person. Of course, in principle, you could assume that the first thing that comes to anyone's mind is a little person. Or not. This experiment was videotaped. We were told to draw something. Of course, we were in a dark room. Well, I drew a little person, the outline of a body, just an image I made up. And imagine, Jim drew the same thing. Just think, he could have drawn a house or, say, a car. Anything. But we both drew the same thing. Another test. The twins were shown a picture and asked to make up a story about it. They wanted us to write a story based on the picture we saw, with a denouement and an ending. And again, everything matched. The researchers really thought that the same person was taking the test. The test results astonished not only the scientists, but also the world's media. Many television channels, magazines, and newspapers attempted to interview Lewis and Springer. The brothers' studies were repeated 8 years later. This time, the scientists were interested in how the twins changed as they aged and whether these changes occurred equally in both twins. By that time, the twins had developed at least one important difference. Lewis married for the third time, and Springer, incidentally, served as best man at the wedding. In addition to Lewis and Springer, the study, which lasted from 1979 to 1999, included 137 pairs of twins separated in childhood. Research showed that genetics predetermined the twins' lives by at least 50%. Naturally, in all these stories, people look for similarities between the twins and ignore the differences. And there are many differences. Many important parameters depend not only on genes. For example, recent research suggests that hereditary factors determine only 15% of human lifespan. The rest depends on environment and chance. Let's return to the very first story. But what kind of house you build on this foundation is up to you. Yes, our lives depend on genes by 50%, maybe a little more. But if there's even 1% that depends on us, we need to act. No,